I guess, or I hope everything will work now. This is like work in progress and started preparing like half an hour ago. So we will see if it plays out. So welcome. We will switch over to English now because we are streaming right now as well. No worries, you are not on the stream. It's just the presenter who's going to be on the screen itself and the presentation itself. So you're not going to be part of the stream. So no worries. And yeah, this is our first in live meeting again after the break, so to say. It's been some time. We've had some meetups in the past 2 years, but they have all been, or the most of them have been virtual. So we are very happy to be here, and then we can finally see each other. I'm just having some simple slides to get this all started. The main focus is going to be on the speakers, of course. More to them later on. We have got 2 talks, so you can look forward to that. But I wanted to give some, since we have 2 talks and we have around 2 hours, I wanted to have some fillers. So we'll get started, have something to talk about, and then getting to the talks itself. So first of all, some general notes. First of all, as I said, it's a live event. We see each other again, it's a personal event. I'm very happy that you're all here. I mean, we're I don't know, I haven't counted, but we're around 30 people maybe. So that's very nice. It's almost everyone who said who attends is actually here. So I'm very happy you did all that. Since it's not so easy to maintain the numbers and not being too big, and you know the drill. And on this place, a very special thanks to Moya for hosting us. It's a very nice place here. So you can grab drinks for free here. So you can just go behind the kitchen on the right side. It's pretty dangerous there, but you should survive. Just go in there on the right-hand side. You will find the fridge where you can do all the drinks. Later on, and around 8 p.m., we will get some pizzas as well. So Moya did everything for us. So again, thank you very much to Moya for doing that for all. And that's why we have a spot for them now, so they can say something about Moya itself, because that's the least we can do. And let me just switch over to that. And Matze, feel free to say something.
Yeah, thanks. Also welcome from us. So I'm Matze, I'm working here. So in case you have any questions, feel free to approach me. And we're really happy to, for the first time now, also host a Flutter meetup. We announced that with you guys quite several times before and during the pandemic, but always had to cancel then. So cool, it finally works out. But you might wonder, Moya is using Flutter? Is it like that? What are we doing with it? So one thing we are doing with it is we have our, you as a Moya user, you might not know that, but internally we have quite some more software systems and are quite sophisticated about all the operations and optimizing that as well and making it really efficient. And with that, we have an internal operations app, which we hand to our drivers to basically be a companion for the workday. See their working shifts, see how much tipping money they earned, do damage reports, lock and unlock the vehicles, and so on. And that thing is fully written in Flutter. Because for Flutter, for that app, Flutter was a really good fit for us. Before that, it was fully native on Android and iOS, and then we did a full migration and full rewrite. That worked out really nicely. Since then, we are also starting a few more projects with it. So you might know this one, going around in the city quite a lot. And inside that, we have this intro screen. So that so far is not written in Flutter, but for that we are also doing a full rewrite now with Flutter. That's basically that. Here's some few new designs, and that's I guess not all, but to give you a rough idea of it. And also you might have heard that in a few years we want to have such vehicles going around, fully automated, self-driving, and there inside the vehicle we are automating also the whole experience for the customers. And there we will also power some stuff with Flutter. But about that's all quite in progress, and I can't really share any details. But when you're interested working on it or getting to know more about it, or we are hiring, of course. So yeah, there's some of our tech stacks we are using, so not just Flutter, quite some other things as well. In case you're interested, feel free to approach me or go there and apply directly. Yeah, that is that. Maybe a bit more hosting things. So we have a Wi-Fi you can enter. Then I have to approve it, but yeah, feel free. And yeah, the toilets are here behind me. Drinks are free, as I mentioned. Just go all the way to the back to the windows and then right, and then you will find a big fridge. Feel free to grab anything you like. Besides that, when there are any problems, feel free to approach me. And then have some fun.
Great. Thank you a lot. Thank you very much, Matze. Very cool stuff. On that note, like later on or after this slide, I want to talk about some what's new in Flutter. It's not like everything that's new, of course, but just some highlights I saw. And on that note, since you say you're rewriting your Moya app, I think Burger King just relaunched their app in Flutter as well. So it was really cool. Doesn't know it? Tough. Okay, so yeah, thanks again. Thanks for Moya for hosting this, making this possible to be here in this place. I really like this place. Very cool to chill out. We didn't even say that because afterwards we will have an network session, of course, since that's why we are here, of course. And we have a table tennis even here, so we can even play some table tennis. So look forward to that. And some another notes for upcoming events. Of course, this should not be the last event. We want to host all the events coming for, and and it would be very cool if some of you or some people, whatever, who want to have some talks, for example, because. In the past, we from the organization team had some talks as well, but I mean, this is not the goal. It's not like we as an organization want to give some talks. Sometimes if you feel like there is something we want to give out, so why not? We can have a talk, but other than that, that's why we have this whole meetup concept, so everyone can have a safe space where all the people who are looking forward to Flutter and just want to say something, they have a new cool project working on, new package, or just what's new in Flutter, whatever it is, something Flutter related, or in any case has something to do with Flutter, feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to have some of you folks as a talk here. We can schedule them and see what time fits for you. But I think it's a great opportunity. As you can see, it's not like it's a huge crowd. It's like a very humble amount of people. We can just talk freely here, and I think it's just the best opportunity to I don't know, get started, have this fresh feeling, talk about Flutter, what we all love to do, and why not share all the knowledge? That's what it's all about. And yeah, so thanks for being here. Again, can't stress this enough. Really cool to be here, to have you all here, and be able to do all that. It's very cool to be able to do that. So yeah, I just wanted to, as an intro, as a filler, just give you some things that crossed my mind several weeks now, what I thought was mention worthy to say what's new in Flutter. As again, there were a lot of stuff that's happening in Flutter around, but I think these are just some very cool things happening right now. One of them is the Go Router release 5.0. For these people who don't know, like Flutter has a problem with packages, especially state management and routers, but a lot of other packages, which we have a lot of them. And Go Router is yet another routing solution. But the interesting part is that Go Router has initially been created by Chris Sells, who has been working at Google. He transitioned over to another job for now, but he was at Google and built it from Google. So it was like somewhat an official package for Navigator 2. So it was like, okay, a new player coming from Google. So it was interesting. And now when he transitioned away from Google, he actually gave it to the Google community. And now it's actually maintained by Google. So that's very interesting. So that's why it's maybe a good idea to take a look at it. There are a lot of great routing packages. Don't get me wrong. You can use whatever you're confident with. But Go Router is not bad, especially since it released in 5.0. Now we are at 5.03 or whatever. But they have this. They got this nested navigation solution. They have this router config interface, which makes it more easier to actually stand it up. They redesigned their redirection logic and stuff like that. Very cool. I just recently transitioned to the 5.0 myself, and I find it very pleasant to work with. So maybe give it a try. I very, very much like it. So why not take a look at it? Another very interesting is Impeller is in early adopter preview. It's also a very cool thing because, as most of you know, Flutter is using Skier as the baseline rendering engine to have this hybrid rendering engine across all platforms. And they're trying out with their new, fully fledged, own written new rendering engine called Impeller. As you can see, I just picked some tweets from some well-known people in the Flutter community who just tried it out and said it's just amazing. The experience, the performance is great, because I don't know how you experience it, but sometimes if you're working on heavy applications with a lot of animations, a lot of stuff happening, you might experience this so-called jank. They're calling this the animation jank and stuff like that. So maybe it doesn't feel so native anymore, and sometimes you might struggle with that. And Impeller is there, tries to make the experience way better with rewriting the whole rendering engine. And I tried it out as well. For my use cases, it did not have the performance I wished for, but again, it's just an early adopter preview. Other people said it helped them, so it's something to look forward to, but for now it's only an early adopter preview. It came out with Flutter 3.3, I think, and even now I think it might not be the newest information, but from what I've read, it's currently only available for iOS. I'm not sure if it's already in preview for Android, but still, very interesting directions they're going to. And I think it's very important to get Flutter to the next step, especially when we are talking about the heavy users who are really looking for high performance, nice native applications. And the last thing I wanted to stress out, which is also a very important topic, if you're working with Flutter, which is a front-end framework where you're writing client-side applications, you usually will have to come on a point where you need some kind of backend. And of course, you can go with all the public cloud hyperscaler solutions if you just want to have something out of the box. But a lot of people are building the full stack and want to write their own backend as well. And a lot of people are struggling what to use. There are a lot of backends, as a lot of frameworks, just as Flutter for the front end, there are a lot of frameworks for the backend applications. But what I found interesting is that there's one new player, which is called Serverpod. And the cool thing is that Serverpod, it's fully free, open source. You can just use it right off the box, and it's written. It's written in Dart. So you write your backend code in Dart as well, just like you write Flutter code. So you have some synergy between your client and server application, because as I wrote down, you have some code generation stuff, so you can write models and stuff like that, and they got synchronized between client and server, so you don't have to think, okay, how do I pass my objects and stuff like that. Then you have some common problems you will face, like how do I log my backend, or how do I log everything? How do I think about authentication? How do I access databases? All this stuff. And Serverpod is trying to solve all these problems in a free and open source way. You can just host it on your own, and has a lot of built-in stuff already done for you. To be honest, I haven't tried it myself. I have only seen it in videos and some showcases. But it looked very promising, and they are approaching the 1.0 release. They are currently at 0.9-ish, somewhere there. And you can see the tweet from just 3 days ago, the 29th? Yeah, like 3 days ago they wrote they are just working on their upcoming release 1.0, which should maybe happen. It will be this year, maybe even in October, who knows. And so yeah, if you sometimes think, I would also like to have some control over my backend, you maybe want to write some backend code, or you already do, why not give Serverpod a try and see for yourself how it works out. So yeah, these were just some things I want to point out. I think that there's a lot of stuff happening in Flutter. I could probably just have a talk about 2 hours long about all the stuff that's happening around Flutter. You all know there's a lot of traction going on. I just want to handpick some of them. And yeah. So I think it's now time to go to the talks. And for the first talk, we have Damien, who will present us software craftsmanship in Flutter. So I will just hand it over to his presentation. Oh. And then, yeah. No. Okay. We have to live with that. So, ne? Okay.
Hey.
strange feeling after 2.5 years to stand in front of people again. Really nice, but also a little bit scary. Today I'm talking about how to have fun while improving your software craftsmanship as a Flutter developer. I'm a freelance Flutter developer, consultant and coach, basically meaning I develop Flutter software. I help people who have problems developing their software, and I also coach people with the adoption of Flutter and basically onboarding new team members onto Flutter. My first Flutter Create was exactly 3 years ago. I was hosting a meetup in Freiburg, doing a Flutter study jam, and basically that got me hooked. And now I'm here and doing freelance work with Flutter. My academic background is that I have a teaching track, Bachelor of Arts with Physics and Computer Science, so not the usual way of going into computer science, just as a side note. And just recently I decided to go more into teaching, and I founded the Widgets Academy, where I help teams to onboard onto Flutter, or teams who already have Flutter or who are already working with Flutter to onboard more team members to Flutter. And I also provide advanced training, so if you have any topics where you would like to have some training, you can just come and ask me and I will provide you with training. This is not for personal development, this is purely business to business. So if you have any personal questions, just feel free to ask me. That's always free. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. Just reach out if you have any questions. Okay, so let's talk about craftsmanship for a moment. Craftsmanship basically means working with your hands, creating objects, using tools. So we have tools like these in the physical world, and like most of those tools you probably have never used, and I probably have never used. But if we would have to use any of these tools, we would take a look at them and figure out how to use them to achieve the goal which we are currently trying to achieve. So for example, if we want to saw or to cut through, let's say, a board of wood, we would take a saw and we would be able to cut through this piece of wood. But if we would be tasked with creating, let's say, a piano out of wood, that would need a completely different level of skill to achieve exactly the same thing with the same tool. So we have the same tool, but we need to have a different level of competency. And when I was thinking about that, I came up with a term called minimum viable competency. And viable means to be able to do something and to be successful in doing said thing. So, for example, using a saw, I've been using a saw in my life for many, many years. I'm 30 years now, and I think with 4 or 5 years I probably used the saw for the first time. But I would not say that I'm an artist using the saw, for example. I'm only rising to the level of competency which I need. So in my day-to-day work, as a Flutter developer, I read a lot, but I'm not really quick at reading. If I was just by doing it a lot, improving all the time, I would probably be able to read like a whole page like in a blink, but that's not the case. So we are only rising to the level of competency which we need, which is adequate to solving our problem. The same goes for typing on the keyboard. We are software developers, but that doesn't mean that we are like virtuosos and we can't really type super fast. Or using the IDE. We are spending hours and hours inside of our own IDE. But do we know all the features? When was the last time we looked into the changelog of the IDE and saw which new features were added, which shortcuts we can use? There are like lists and man pages and everything. It's all available. But we are only rising to the level of competency which is needed to basically achieve the task at hand. The same goes for programming concepts. English as a second language. You see me struggle through the evening because it's not my first language. And yeah, the same also goes for writing Flutter code. When we are writing Flutter code, we rise to the level which is needed for us to solve our tasks. And then if we want to solve something special, then that's something completely new. Let's say we want to create a package to solve something, then we might need to dig deeper, and our minimum becomes higher, and we rise up. And for me, it's always fun to learn something new. So it's fun to learn something new, but I'm also somebody who is really comfortable at the level where I'm at. So I try to challenge myself and to force myself a little bit outside of my comfort zone, and to raise my minimum just by raising my surroundings, by changing the project requirements, for example. That's something I can do to basically raise my minimum, because that's what we can do. And I've got a couple ideas of how you can raise your minimum viable competency. So we are all software developers. We all need to somehow interface our brain with our computer and bring our thoughts into software, into the computer. And it would be nice if we had a chip which we could implant into our head and read and write data to our computers. Currently, my brain-computer interface looks like this. So when I started out, I was using just a normal keyboard and a mouse. And then I switched to a different keyboard just to get a different feel and to see how that felt. And then I switched keyboard layouts as well. So I'm not using the standard layout anymore, and I took a look at that. And then I also got a split keyboard, and that's currently what I'm working with. So the two keyboards in the middle, I just put them in for the photo, and the mouse I think I use only when I'm doing 3D sketches, and the same goes for the 3D mouse in the top left, which is not used for programming. But yeah, I switched to a new keyboard layout, and that's something interesting. So we all are using our keyboards, and I think every one of us can type as fast as we need. And it's not about typing faster, it's about what else could we have available. So the keyboard was created for the typewriter. The typewriter doesn't have lots of special symbols, because you don't need to have special symbols when you're writing on a typewriter. But if you have another layer on your keyboard, which gives you access to all the special characters which you use during programming, then that's really useful, because currently they are tucked away at places where they didn't obtrude into the normal typing. And that's adding a third layer, for example, something you can easily do with some software which you can download. I think Carabiner Elements is one you can use for Mac. Or on the right-hand side, we see a fourth layer, which also gives us navigation. So we can also navigate without needing to switch to the arrow keys, for example, or without needing to use any special bindings like Vim bindings or anything. That can all happen inside of a mechanical keyboard which you use externally. Or if you have like a software like Carabiner Elements, you can also use your internal keyboard and just add that to your existing setup without changing how you type so far. If you want to, you can switch to the Neo layout, for example, which is optimized for the German language. You see the heat map is basically on the home row. You rarely have to type outside of the home row. That's just one thing I did for myself to basically push myself a little bit further. And one benefit of switching to a different layout is that you can't look at the keyboard anymore for typing. So you cannot fall back to a lower minimum, because you don't have the letters written on your keyboard. So the minimum viable competency usually is something where we fall down to if we don't stretch ourselves all the time. And stretching ourselves all the time takes energy, and we don't want to use energy, so we are falling down to the level which is most comfortable. So basically removing the keycaps could be one way to improve your touch typing. And if you are good at touch typing, that means that you hit your keys more accurately. Hitting the keys more accurately basically says, okay, you're making less mistakes, and it makes it much easier, for example, to use shortcuts. When you use shortcuts, and you don't have to look down onto your keyboard and back up and back down and back up, that's something that's really annoying in your flow. And that's one of the big advantages of touch typing, which is often overlooked. And if you think that a little bit further, then you can also go into Vim, for example. So this is not a talk about Flutter and Vim. But when I made the switch, I was lucky that I had somebody who I could ask all the commands which I was using before in IntelliJ, and I wrote myself a cheat sheet. And that's pretty much all I'm using in my IDE. So when you're using your IDE, you're probably also just using around the same number of commands to basically do your day-to-day work. There may be a few more, but that's basically the list. So yeah, and just to reiterate on switching to Vim, Vim also raises the minimum, because Vim is hard. You can't even quit it without knowing how to quit Vim. So the minimum is like the comfortable level of using Vim is a lot higher than going into an IDE which has buttons and hover and menus and lots of help which you can access by the mouse. And on that note, the mouse is is one of the things you follow the mouse and your focus stays on the screen rather than going into a shortcut. So if you try to hit a shortcut and you don't know where the keys are, then you have to look down. But if you follow your mouse, it's much more focused for you. You're feeling much more productive because you stay on the screen and you don't lose your focus. So another benefit of switching to something where you basically know your keys. Yeah, if you're interested in Flutter and Vim, just hit me up after the talk. It worked great. I think I used IntelliJ once after switching, and I haven't looked back. And theoretically, it should even be possible to run Flutter apps inside of the terminal. I've been struggling with that a little bit, but I think we can get there. Okay. So let's take a look at Flutter and a couple of ways, how to raise our minimum viable competency here. Who of you has used Flutter before? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, so a couple people who could answer my next question. So when we're talking about the minimum viable competency, so the competency level which you basically fall down to or raise up to in your day-to-day work, you have all probably heard about the 3 layers or trees: the widget tree, the element tree, and the render tree. So show of hands, who of you thinks that the minimum viable competency is the widget tree? Okay. Who of you thinks it's the element tree? Learning or knowing about how to use the element tree. Okay. And lastly, the render object tree. Okay. Okay, that was quite expected. So I think we all know that the widget tree layer is what we are always using when we are writing widgets. We are composing our tree, and that's basically the thing we have direct contact with, or so we think. So if you use keys, you're basically interfacing the element tree, because the element tree is like the caching layer behind the widget tree, and Flutter, for comparison, to know which widget has changed, or basically to see if 2 widgets are separate inside of the widget tree, only makes a comparison of runtime type and key. So as soon as you insert a key into your widget, you're actually talking to the element tree and telling the element tree which kind of widget it is, or the identity of the widget. Also, if you use the build context inside of your widget, that's also interfacing with the element tree. So you might already be working with the element tree a lot more than you think. And so it might be interesting just to dig a little bit deeper and to learn more about the element tree, because that's apparently something you're already using. And I've got a little idea how to do that. Okay, one thing in between. We were talking about software craftsmanship, and for me, in the context of Flutter, that basically means going from, is there a package for that? For each question which you have, you probably go to pubdev in the beginning. Like when you start out learning Flutter, everything is a challenge, and it's difficult to write stuff from scratch if you don't know how to do that. So that's why you go to pub.dev and you look into how to solve, I don't know, let's say you want to have a drop-down menu. And then you look into pub.dev and you just pull the package in, and that's good because it works for you. And then later on you see, okay, that drop-down menu just doesn't conform to the design which we have, and I can't really style it that way. So later on you probably need to create your own package for that. And the transition from is there a package to that to I can create a package for that is a continuum, and I think that's what most of us are looking towards. So trying to go from using the software or using the framework to understanding the framework to being able to contribute to the ecosystem. And one of the hot topics in Flutter is, of course, state management. And I think state management is one of the things which lowers the minimum viable competency in Flutter. So because we have the state management solutions, we can get away with knowing much less about Flutter itself. And there is something called inherited widget, and basically that's all you need to do your state management inside of Flutter. And if you look at the full discussion, you can go to Very's Twitter profile and just scroll through. It's in the beginning of September, she asked this question, are you using inherited widgets? And many people said they've never heard about inherited widgets. And few people answered, among them 3 which I picked out. Thomas Burkhardt, who wrote Get It, Craig Labens, who is from the Flutter team, and Rémi Rousselet, who wrote Provider and Riverpod. And basically what Rémi is saying, he wrote his packages so people don't have to use inherited widget. And that's fine. That means in order to do your day-to-day tasks, you can just use the package. But if you want to go to a level where you could write the package yourself, it might be worth investigating how it works under the hood. Or if you have some strange behavior of that package, if you know how it works under the hood, you can understand and you can probably adjust your code so that the package keeps working. For example, provider. Why, for example, can't you pass 2 different or 2 classes of the same type with a provider down the widget tree? If you look into inherited widget, you will understand. And that's basically my prompt for you for the weekend, for example, just to write a small app using just inherited widget for state management. Or you could also do that as an experiment in one of the features which we are currently developing in your day job, if that's something that could happen there. I've got another interesting thing for the minimum viable competency conversation, or basically how we progress in our Flutter journey. So when we start out learning Flutter for the first time, we create lots of new apps for all the tutorials, all the YouTube videos, each time we do a Flutter create. And then we know most of the things and we start developing our first app. And probably we are doing a spike, and maybe we are doing a Flutter create for that. A spike is basically trying out a new feature, a new package in an isolated environment. Or a package is not working and we are downloading the package and we're looking into the examples, or something like that. That's probably one of the ways which could prompt us to do a Flutter create. And other than that, if you're working in a corporate environment, it can easily happen that for years on end, you're not using Flutter create anymore. Like, there are all those legacy softwares, the monolith in Java, in the Java world. You come into your company, the software has already been living for 5 years, and after 10 years you leave the company and it's still there, and you've not created one single new application in the whole time. So you don't know how the creation process works, or you don't know what's needed or required to get it up running. So yeah, I would advocate strongly to at least once a month create a new Flutter application, even if it's just for trying some new stuff out, or for ServerPod, which you just mentioned, just giving it a try and just setting a timer for 20 minutes or 2 hours or whatever time you have at hand, and just going in there and doing a little bit of practice and trying stuff out outside of your confines of the project you're working in currently. And yeah, examples for what you could do are code cutters, package examples, spikes, or trying out new patterns. So I've got a couple ideas how to not be stuck in the one project. And as I said, code cutters could be one way of not being stuck. So code cutters is a very old concept. The one which I've been coming into contact lately has this format that you have 1.5 to 2 hours of development time, and 2 people are pairing each time, and it should be 2 different people each time who are pairing. And the benefit of that is, on the one hand side, you see how somebody else codes, and you also see all the little quirks. Like, I showed you my cheat sheet for Vim, and I've also have a few other hacks how I do my work. And recently, when I was doing one of those code cutters, I saw somebody using what the F. That's a small command line tool that basically autocorrects if you do something wrong. You have a typo inside of there. You hit enter, and then you can just type WTF, I think, and then it autocorrects it for you, and it's really nice. And I heard about it, but I've never seen somebody use it. So the hidden benefits of pairing and pairing with different people are really big. To continue on the format of the code cutter, it's usually 2 to 3 small tasks. It's not necessary to get through all of those tasks in the development time, but it should be in a size that you can get through at least 2 of those and have 1 bonus task, for example. And they should be consecutive, meaning the first task should come first, and when you have finished that, you go to the next. And that's also a natural transition between 2 people pairing, because oftentimes when you're doing that remotely, it's not easy to just move the keyboard around. So that can be a git commit, the other person checks it out, you switch on your video screen, and you continue programming. And that way both people have about the same time of coding. It's not real pair programming in the extreme programming sense, but it's already a lot better than what many of us are doing day to day. And in the end, if you have enough people, like not only 1 group, but 2, 3, 4 groups who can do that, it's nice to have a short presenting of the results. If you have 1 facilitator, the person can pick out some unique results, and each team chooses 1 person to present their code and basically show how they solved the problem. And it's often just a couple lines of code, so it's really easy to understand, because everybody was working on the same problem set. Everybody already knows what it's all about. And today I learned section is also nice, because for me the WTF was something today I learned. And maybe this other person I was pairing with has never shown that to anybody else in the round which is present. So me sharing that I learned that can help all the others. So that's something you can incorporate into your corporate environment And I think most of you will have the option to get a little bit of development time, and that's something you can do either weekly, bi-weekly, once a month. I think it's nice if you manage to do that weekly, but yeah, that's one of the things you can do to get out of the one project situation. Another thing which I really like is that if you create a spike, to create it as a new project. A spike is trying out, for example, server pod as a backend, or which router to go with, or which state management to use, or whatever you have, what file picker to use, or if you want to implement something, just do it in a separate package. That has the huge benefit that it can't accidentally end up in production. And we all know that's going to happen. And we are talking about craftsmanship, and I've been really trying not to raise the finger and say this is not craftsmanship. But here, this is one of the things which we can do as craftsmen to keep our integrity, to say, okay, we will do a spike, we will do investigative work, and you, as a business person, we can ask the project manager, or however the person is called, for this time, for the research time. And this research time is purely research time and not time that is meant to be going back into the project. And by moving that spike outside of the project, we have the benefit that it can't accidentally go back in. And also other team members, so if you are in a bigger corporation, you can use this as a reference point. You don't need to have any knowledge about the project for which you were creating your spike. So this holds true for any software architecture, or if it's Flutter, if it's backend, whatever it is. If you don't do it in your project as a branch, but rather create a new separate package for that, that's really powerful, because you can share it, and you could even push it back to, let's say, one of the pub.dev packages which you were trying out. You pull that, you create a new example in the examples folder as your spike. You already have everything around that which you need to create your spike, and then if it works, you can just push that example back as a pull request and give back to the community, and everybody wins, because it will be probably maintained afterwards because it's now part of the package. And for you, it's a nice thing because you probably get a little bit of recognition. And if you have another issue later on with this package, which you are now using, and you raise the issue, you get feedback much more quick. And also, if you are doing it completely wrong and you created your example in the thinking that what you did is exactly how it is supposed to be used, and the package maintainer tells you, oh no, that is not how I meant you to use it, then you also get feedback really quickly. So this is something you can advocate for inside of your team, that it is allowed that you push code to GitHub, because oftentimes it's not allowed for you to go outside of your corporate ecosystem and push stuff into the open source world. But we are all living from the open source world. Flutter is open source. Most of the packages, or I think all of the packages, are open source. We don't have a way yet to get binary packages into Flutter. So everything we are using is open source. So why not give something back to the community? And this is one of the ways, and also one of the ways how you can reason to your superiors why you want to do that. To get feedback from the package maintainer himself or herself can be quite nice. Do you have a little bit more focus? Then I have a small appendix. Otherwise, I would end the talk here. Go for it? Okay. So some food for thought. Those are really, really, really old books. And the people who wrote those books are probably already ending their careers now. And so why am I showing you those books? Because the people who wrote those books have so much experience, and the experience is definitely not with modern reactive frameworks. And the experience with clean code or clean architecture comes from a completely different world than the world we are living at currently. But then again, we also have legacy software, and we are creating legacy software every day. Writing software which is not tested is by some people considered legacy software as soon as it's untested and hits main. So that's one of the things I think from, I don't know if it's working effectively with legacy code, but one of those books basically goes into that and says, okay, if you write untested code, it's legacy code. Live with it or don't live with it, but yeah. So also there are many interesting concepts inside of clean code, clean architecture, and so on. And there's a little buzzword bingo for you. So separation of concerns, single responsibility principle, dry, meaning don't repeat yourself, Yagni, you ain't gonna need it, or last responsible moment, and then the infamous solid. I will not spell it out because you can just look it up what it means. And for some of you who know it, you see that at least one of the points is already on the slide. It's a buzzword bingo, and I've often heard people talking about it, that they don't really like knowing about patterns or referring to, let's say, the strategy pattern by the name strategy pattern. They say, okay, if I want to use it, I know how it works, I can just use it. But I think it's good to know those buzzwords and to see why those patterns, for example, were created. Or to see why was clean architecture invented, for example, and what projects clean architecture is meant for, and that not every project benefits from using clean architecture, that it's certain projects which can benefit from it, and others which won't. And also the Yagni principle, I think that's one very powerful principle. You ain't gonna need it. So don't use state management solutions until you need them. Use inherited widget. So, and don't repeat yourself. It's really easy in Flutter to refactor stuff. So, but also don't make it too generic. So if you refactor something, don't make it so generic that everything can possibly use this certain button which you just created, because you ain't gonna need it. So those two are on the same scale, two different ends of the same, of the same line, basically. And yeah, that's basically what I wanted to tell you, is just to dig into the old books and just have a look at those and take a beer or a coffee and just go through them. Don't read them word by word because they're not that relevant to your day-to-day work. But the concepts can give you certain ideas or give you an insight into how something works which you are working with currently, because probably you are working with some backend, and maybe it's a Java backend, and maybe they're using something in there. Or, I don't know, who of you knows what Hungarian notation is? Okay. Who of you has used kdebug mode in Flutter? Okay, so Hungarian notation is something that came up to basically create a wording around, or to, in the name of the variable or in the name of the function, know what it is about. And the k in kdebug mode comes from the Hungarian notation, and I think it means constant. Because C was already taken, they had to use k. So you see, even in our today's modern framework, which is deprecating lots and lots of old stuff, they still have artifacts from back when the length of our variable names was limited. So this is really interesting to think about, that this still has an effect on our current development. So just nice to know, and maybe that's something you will pick up when you take a look into one of those old books. And you can also deduct them from your taxes if you didn't know that. So just buy a lot of books and you have a cool bookshelf, put it behind your whiskey bar, and makes for nice conversation. I just put that up for a brief moment because I misused software craftsmanship as a title for this topic. This is the official version of the first time they were coming up with the term software craftsmanship. But that's also just raising the finger a lot of the times. Okay. Yeah, on that note, I would like to thank you for your time and end this talk here. If you want to connect, I'm on Twitter. Since Flutter Vikings, I'm also more active there. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. If you have any personal questions, just hit me up. If you're interested in working with me, I do dev work and consultancy at hey@damianbast.com and training and coaching at widgetsacademy.com. Yeah, and the slides are here, so if you want to grab the slides, and I think we will put a link into the meetup description as well. All right, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. A very, very good talk. Very liked a lot of its aspects. Very, very cool to see it. And I think we can all learn from a lot of them. Before we head over to the next talk, usually when we are doing it remote, virtually, like all the people dropping off and on, like you can go just go away, grab a beer, whatever, no one will notice. But I won't force you to sit here the whole 2 hours without getting a new beer. So we'll make a fast 5-minute break, just a really small break. Grab some new beer, some drinks, go to the toilet, whatever you need, and we'll just start after that. Like let us meet at 10 after 7. So that's just 5 minutes. We'll just run.
Kannst du dann bitte sicherstellen, dass auf dem iPhone die Internetverbindung ist? Und brauchst du das Kabel dafür oder geht das auch kabellos?
Ja, kabellos.
Super, danke dir.
Bitte. Magst du noch ein Bier mitbringen? Ja, nein. this would work. Okay, now without further ado, I would hand it over to Paul and his talk about custom overlays. So have fun, everyone.
And we are not on the first slide,
Yeah.
which is not now.
No.
Okay, so nice being here. I'm actually just a little bit excited. And yeah, not having had a talk in quite a few years right now. I see that the slides are working out quite well. I was thinking about a darkish theme so that I don't put too much strain on your eyes. And we'll see how that works out. So, just like Damian, a little bit about myself. I'm Paul. I am right now working as a freelance Flutter lead developer for my clients. And my first Flutter project was in 2019 too. I have been coding for quite some time now, despite my young age, since 2011 exactly. And yeah, I'm born 1995. And that's basically the introduction. So, first and foremost, why do I talk to you? What do I want to tell you? I had the experience Damian taught us about quite a few minutes ago. I had the task to build a custom design system for my client, including having to build custom drop-downs, which is a pain in you know what. And I also wanted to be able to show a fancy application onboarding, having overlays on some elements where to point the user to, hey, if you want to create a new document, go there, and things like that. So I came to the point where using a stack was not enough for me anymore, and I had to raise my minimum competency level. And for that, I needed to use overlays. And first, the question is, what's an overlay exactly? So basically, I'm telling you a little bit of the documentation from the overlay class in the Flutter documentation, and just reading out a few parts I found most important. Starting with this piece is where they tell us that overlay is basically a stack of entries. Remember the stack word, it's important. That can be managed independently. And then it goes on with the overlay widget uses a custom stack implementation, which is very similar, again, to the stack widget, very important piece of information. And the main use case of set overlay is that it's related to navigation, being able to insert widgets on top of the pages in an app. Remember that one too, navigation. And next thing, I was asking myself, maybe I can look at some examples on using overlays, and I came across the documentation, read about the navigation part, and then I thought maybe I want to know what the navigation does with overlays exactly. And maybe some of you right now are thinking, I don't need overlays, I don't use them. That's not correct, because if you use show date picker, it uses show dialog under the hood. And if you use show dialog, it uses navigator.push. Same goes for show modal bottom sheet, or show search, or show any of those show methods. And in the end, navigator.push uses an overlay. And yeah, notice something. So to conclude that part, how do I use them? Basically, we use the overlay the navigator implements for us, or better to say, instantiates. Most of the time, that's sufficient. Most of the times, not always. And now to the part where we get to build something and do it ourselves. Our very first custom overlay, 100% self-made, super efficient, super fancy. It's not a lot of code. To create an overlay, you need the overlay state, which is accessible by overlay.of context, as you can see here. It's quite well visible, I think. So that's that. And you then create an object of overlay entry, where you have one required parameter, which is the builder. We all, who uses Flutter, of course, know that builder is just a method in this case where we get a context and we can then return a widget. After having created that overlay entry object, we then use overlay state.insert to insert that overlay entry in the overlay. And when we want to remove that overlay, we can use remove on the overlay entry. This will produce that result. It fills the screen completely, but it's an overlay. Now we might ask ourselves, I want to size my overlay and I want to position it somehow. You need to make sure it is in the correct place horizontally and vertically, and for that we can use positioned, because it's basically a stack implementation where those widgets work. For those of you not familiar with stack is basically a widget that allows us to put widgets on top of each other visually. Positioned widgets are used inside of the stack's children to position those widgets either to say that they fill the space available to the stack widget or to position them relatively. Now our code becomes something like this here, where we have a positioned widget directly on top of the returned widget tree of the builder, and we can then tell it a position. We can also use the width and height, or we just use the top, left, right, and bottom arguments. Well, now that we have that out of the way, we have our overlay, which is now behind the, which is the green bar around the blue nice rectangle, and we want to make sure that our nice bar is where it should be around that widget. Wait a second, I need to go back. How do I do that? I use the arrow keys. That's it. So, okay. So we know that we can use position to position our overlay, but maybe if you want to display something on a specific widget and not on the whole screen, we need to be able to get a position of that widget and so on and so forth. So basically, we want to wrap our container with a nice border in this example, and we need to get the position of that container. For that, we create a widget, and that widget takes child as its parameter, and it's just, in its build method, it's just returning the child, nothing else. But by doing that, we get the availability to use find render object on the context, cast it into a render box, and from that we can get the size of the child we have, because we just return the child and thus have the same size and constraints as the child gets, and also the position. Now our overlay entry gets a little bigger, and we have the top and the left, which is the position of the child we're using there, and the width and the height, where we use the height and the width of the child. So now that we have this, we continue working on our app and we resize the window maybe, or we just scroll and this happens. Too bad. Our overlay stays in position, the child is moving and doesn't look nice. Next step is how can we follow our child widget, and for that we introduce two new widgets. We use the composited transform target, which is a widget that enables us to track a widget, which is its child, which is the top part in the code here, and we use a composited transform follower widget, which we use to follow the target, obviously. We also need to pass a layer link object, but I won't go into that right now. If you're interested, just look up the documentation. I want to keep things simple, just scratching the surface, but keeping it still interesting. So this constellation enables us to follow a widget. The important parts here is in the widget's build method of our overlay widget, where we create the overlay entry later on too, we return the composited transform target wrapping our child widget. And secondly, when creating the overlay entry, we use composited transform follower directly beneath positioned. That's important to keep in mind. We are inside of something that behaves like a stack. So if we would switch things up and put composited transform follower above positioned, it will not work. It will throw an exception, because stack requires us, if we use a positioned, first the positioned, below that everything else. There's also a parameter I put in there, or two basically. There is show when unlinked, which is important. That's default true, but the default behavior you would want is false, because that means once the widget is removed from the tree we are linking to, the overlay will still stay on the screen for a few frames until you remove it by yourself. That also means that once the widget is removed from the screen, there will no longer be the possibility for the composited transform follower to get the position of that layer link, because there's nothing to link to. It will just pop on the default, which is top left center, not top left center, top left on the screen, which will look, again, not very nice. This assures that once the link is broken, it's removed. And following that principle, we will now get a result like this, which is as expected. Now, you might think, great, I can just use it and it will be nice. But if you now have an application with an app bar, you run into the next issue. The overlay is on top of everything. Better to say, what right or now happens, we need to understand first to solve the issue. I will replay the animation just to make sure everybody noticed what happens. There is an overlay wrapping this blue rectangle, applying the greenish rectangle around that, and once we scroll, the rectangle is correctly covered by the app bar because it's visually in the widget tree below that, but the rectangle stays above. So what's happening here? First and foremost, we already read that the overlay is most likely supplied by Navigator, and it's used to display its routes and pages. That means that it's always above everything you see. In this case, also above the app bar. One might expect, logically, that it would not show above the app bar because we just linked it to that, but we only linked it logically. The widget we are wrapping with our overlay is inside its widget tree, but the overlay not. It's in a different branch of that tree that starts way higher below, above that widget and even above the scaffold. So to say we need some kind of render proxy, don't take my word. By proxy, I don't mean the widget directly, I mean just the term. We need to somehow be able to insert the widget visually also in a place where it is not overlapping anything else it shouldn't. Now I get to the point where I didn't have enough time to make super fancy slides for all of that, but there is a package for that. And while creating this little talk, I stumbled across it honestly. Before that, I didn't know about it, and I implemented it myself, and it was a whole lot of work. This package Flutter Portal is very, very handy if you ever come to have a custom dropdown, for example, or wanting to have any sort of overlay that is not a plain dialog where it's okay to overlay the whole app. Because, and I highly recommend you if you're somewhat interested in the topic, to look into the source code of this package. There is a lot of code, I warn you, there's thousands of lines of code because this topic is a rabbit hole that when entered has no end, but it's also quite simple in some explanation at least, as it's basically using a render box proxy to visually render the overlay also where it should appear. I recommend you to look into that. And here's a small example how you use it. You basically have two widgets right now you need. You have a portal widget, which is the widget which by placing it, you specify where anything that is below this widget and is an overlay should visually be rendered, which then circumvents our problem with the app bar. And in the overlay, where we create the overlay entry, we use the portal target inside our overlay entry. This then leads to the expected behavior of our overlay to also hide, because inside of the body we have the portal, and the portal target looks up the tree, finds the nearest portal, and understands where it should render. Now, there is an example. It's not 100% finished. I'm very sorry. I didn't find the time to finish it as well as I wanted. I will definitely do that, but here's the link. And I've also marked it a little bit with the slight blue color. Yeah, it's called Flutter Custom Overlays. And yeah, I will change a little bit on that in the next days, so don't be surprised. And I hope that was of some helpful information for you. Thanks so much for being still with me, and yeah, have a nice evening, I guess.
Do you want to show it?
Ah, yes. Thank you for reminding me. And we have a little. I am unable to use my gestures properly. So basically, if you right now open the repository, check it out, and open the folders, there is two directories. One you should look into, one you definitely shouldn't, because it's not finished. The one interesting for you is step by step, and it has this little application. With that, I wanted to show off the issues and the problems. So basically, for example, if you want to indicate someone where to tap, you could use a stack maybe, but you will always have to overlay. Yes, you could use overflow box, but this gets you in a place you don't really want to be. And this is separated by the same terms I used for my presentation. First, just how to display basic overlay, then how to position the overlay somewhere, and the next, how to position it somewhere where the targeted child is. But if you now see we change the window, it doesn't follow because it can't. And then a complete example where it is also following its child, but has the issue I just showed you, which is this one. And finally, an example on how you could use the portal package, which will just leave you with what you wanted to get. So that's everything right now, 100%. And yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. Very nice. Just another example that, as I started with Flutter some time ago as well, it was like it's kind of easy to get into. It's very cool to get started because it's like you read all the fancy stuff. Like it's hybrid platform. You can deploy to iOS, Android. You can even deploy on desktop versions, even on the web. It's so cool to do that. But once you dive into such examples, you will see that some stuff is not as easy as you was hoped to, and you might dive into kind of web holes and stuff like that. But again, these are the challenges you might look forward to increase the level you want to be at if you want to know where you are at Flutter and your knowledge in general. So just another way, this could also be an example to see how far would you get if you would try it on your own and see what is your level of understanding about, for example, this topic. So I don't even know if it's planned, but it's actually a good example from both of your topics because they match in this aspect. So yeah, so before, like, I have like 2 slides left, I think. Let me get into here again. So now we come to the Q&A session, but before doing that, I would actually like to do something else first, which means, as I said earlier, that we are always looking for people who want to participate and maybe giving some talks, being here as well, and give back to the community, say what you're working on, something interesting about Flutter. I can say that, and you might think, yeah, maybe someday I want to do that. But to give you a bit more initiative to actually do that, you will see what you can get if you're a speaker at us. Because the speaker will get some nice merch. So here for you, and here for you. Enjoy. Coming back to you. And we have some little swag here. Like, it's just stickers for now. We need to expand what we have. But Google only gave us, don't say it to Google, but Google only gave us a sticker on top. Should grab some stickers, Flutter itself. We might even have something else in petto, but maybe Grisha won't. We will see about that. Maybe we have some special things to give out as well. Maybe not today, we will see. But yeah, before going into the actual networking and whatever you want to do today, do you have any, let us use this session if you have any questions regarding the topics itself, of course. This should be priority. If you have any questions regarding the custom overlays, maybe where were the challenges on top, how did you approach this at all, or maybe also craftsmanship, or how did you start out, or whatever. If you have any question about that, feel free to drop them now. Or if you have any general questions, we might even answer in this group as well, because maybe you're having a challenge right now, you want to implement something, or something cool you just stumbled upon and you just want to talk about it. Let's use this session because we have some time left. We would have until 11 p.m. if I'm correct. So we have a lot of time. Don't get me wrong. But for the official timing, why not use this time and see if we have some questions? If not, we can of course just skip to the networking part and you can talk about all the stuff later on. But do any of you have any kind of questions or stuff you want to talk about? Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, I have one. First of all, thanks for the nice talks. Really, I mean, the first talk just made me feel super small. So really nice talks. I have one question about the new Flutter version. I just 3.3 is it right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if someone else experienced it, but we use it in our company of Flutter, and I realized that there's a problem with tabs. So when you just switch between tabs, it just stops sometimes.
Interesting.
I mean, you just see the less. I mean, there's nothing fancy, right? You have your tabs and you have your tab views. There's nothing even reactive or something like this, and you just switch between the tabs. It's a lot of tabs. I would say 6 or 7 tabs with a lot of content, and it just freezes. And it's just in Flutter free. So even if I go through all the navigation, the tab view stays. So
Is there any experience sending just recently? Do you get any feedback in the channel? No feedback at all. No, just
it's really like freezing.
I thought it was something else, but if you say it's only on tabs, it happened to me on the tabs as well, but I can't say why.
Yeah, so the only solution for me was to go another version. By the way, and this helped me to use FVM, so, Flutter version manager, which I really like right now. Yeah, but it's not good. And another thing, just to the audience, because you asked for talks, sometimes we do some talks and we never know if people really want to know about it. So it would be great even to hear if people have some topics in mind they would love to hear. So then it's even easier to get some speakers.
Oh yeah, that's a good one actually. That's a good
because
one.
sometimes I do things and it's like, oh yeah, it's just boring stuff. But maybe other people say, wow, I want to do it. You know?
I would say, generally speaking, if you're on a point where you think this might be interesting, it probably is interesting, especially if you're in Flutter. Even small thing, even how did I start with Flutter? Even very low level talks are very interesting because you got all the different perspectives and ways how to approach topics in general. So I would say if they are Flutter related, generally there are very rare cases where talks are not suited for a talk itself. But that's a good point in general. Since this is the kind of first time we're going in live and we want to see how we expand and go on whatever, it might be a good thing to start maybe don't know, having a designated Slack channel to have more focus on Slack, maybe even have a Discord channel, whatever it is, we might have to see about that. But this might be a good case for maybe having some room where you can have like talk ideas, and people can write in there, and then we can maybe start with giving thumbs up or downs and see if people are interested in this topic, and then we can have see if it's an interesting one. But like for now, honestly speaking, we are happy to have someone from the community speaking and doing a talk in general. So I would say if you have a talk, come to us, and we will probably say, of course, let's do it. But in the future, if this whole thing expands and more people get involved, it might be a good idea to have some kind of channels, which application or whatever it looks like, but then have a way of voting and stuff like that. But yeah, that's a good thing. Like I would say, from my perspective, if you think you might have an idea and you're not sure, first thing first should be just get in touch with us. Write us, and we can just say, we can hit you up, we can just talk about it, and it will probably be a good idea for talk. As I said, I don't think there are much topics which are not talky worthy. So I would say, go for it. Maybe other questions, maybe other things you would like to talk about. Yeah, please.
You implemented it yourself, basically, going through the basics. Yeah. Did you have a look into Go Router? It's basically just a wrapper for Navigator 2.0 to make it more easy to use.
I thought just when it came out, I started a new project, so I thought, okay, I can try this, and I like the declarative way of navigating, but it's also cumbersome.
It's really nice that you did that, because very few people ever dug that deep into Navigator 2.0. So your minimum is quite high. When you now switch to Go Router, you can take all the knowledge which you have from implementing it yourself and just use Go Router and have all the benefits you had before, just having it a little bit easier. That's what I'm using most of the time.
Yeah, I would also say, just to add to that, like there are a lot of, like not as much packages as for state management, but there are a lot of packages for routing itself. And with the rise of Navigator 2.0, there has been even a rise in packages for trying to implement this kind of API. And like I don't want to be biased, probably you don't want to be biased as well, but Go Router is a good starting point, because it is kind of promoted by Google, or it is maintained by Google. It's a good starting point. You won't make anything wrong. But again, there are other packages who would actually fit your needs as well. So I would say that's you wouldn't make too much mistake going by the score, the usage, and just see it for yourself. Maybe you like the approach of other packages more because you are more familiar from other frameworks, and why not go with it? As long as it fits your need, you don't have to go with the package everyone goes just because everyone says so. Other packages are probably also very great. So, but yeah, as Damien said, it's very good that you tried it, because a lot of people don't do that. And I think it's a good thing to try it at least, and then see, okay, it's maybe a bit tricky. Maybe there's a solution for that. I don't have to do, but you at least you understand the problem. That's very cool. Very cool. Maybe other topic. Maybe other thing I want to talk about. Navigation is a very good topic. You can have a whole day just talking about navigation itself, and still not find a solution probably. But yeah.
Go Router. I use personally GetX for routing because I really like it. For me, I decided to take it 2 years ago. And what I liked was that I was able to get rid of get context. But do you ever compare it?
I tried the problem with GetX is that GetX is trying to be a solution for a lot of problems in one package, and you probably can do a lot of stuff with GetX. And again, the community or people can say whatever they want as long as it fits your need. Why not? Don't get me wrong. Like, I did not compare GetX with, for example, Go Router because for me, for example, GetX would, in my brain, in my usage, it would be more like I would use it for seeing how it fits for state management and not for routing. So what I did more was like just as you did, I tried to do a basic implementation of the Navigator 2.0 and just found a place and was like, okay, it works. And then I did something new and it was like, okay, it doesn't work anymore. And it was like, okay, maybe I should see what other people already did. And then I tried like 3 packages. It was like Beamer. Beamer is a package I really like as well. Beamer, Go Router, and Autoroute. These are like the 3 navigation packages for 2.0 I tried. And honestly, at the end of the day, they all work. They all have some quirks, some stuff you have to do different from the other package. But I think if you have some special cases, there might be a package more suited for your use case. For example, I had an application where I had to deal with fragments in the URL, like these hashtags, and this is something not usually used, but I needed it in this specific case because it was Spotify API and stuff, and I used this, and I was like, damn it. And I was using Beamer, and then it didn't work, and I was looking at the issues, and someone else also was like, it doesn't work with fragments. I was like, damn it. And then I tried Beamer, and Beamer worked. And I was like, yes, nice, Beamer. And then I used Beamer for a long time, and then I had some weird behavior with nested navigation, and I was like, okay, now the fragments work, now the nested navigation does not work, so fuck. And I was like iterating, going from left to right, and I would say, find a package which feels good for you, and find a package which like is a solution for your problems, and as long as it fits your need, you're good to go. And if GetX, for example, is one of them which works for your use cases, it's perfectly fine. That's at least my opinion. But it might, like, yeah. Sure. Yeah, I mean, honestly, again, we can talk about navigations all day, but like, if you are targeting mobile first, or maybe even only mobile, and like don't have special use cases like deep linking or maintaining state, declarative, you might still go with 1.0 and you won't have any problems. Like I still have one of my production applications still being on 1.0 because it works, and it was like having to rewrite all that for what? For the same feature, just for doing it. Then I would come back to this. I would say I make a new project and start trying to do it there, and not trying to have run of this big project and trying to refactor it all the time, all the new stuff getting into it might not be worth it. For example, especially if it works already. So, but yeah, 1.0, for some of my applications, it still works, so why not? But for new projects, I actually tend to go with 2.0 because there is stuff which is more difficult to do with 1.0 than with 2.0. But it's again, like whatever you need, whatever problem you are facing. But yeah. Maybe another problem. Yeah. Go. The pizza? Yes. We have like 13 minutes, at least officially. I'm not sure where we ordered the pizzas. I'm not sure how fast they are, or how we will see about that. Huh? Matze already left, so maybe we don't even have any pizzas. No, but I think it should be a bit. We here about 10 minutes. I will ask one last time. Do you have any more questions? Maybe something we want to discuss in the big round? Oh yeah, sure.
Is anyone actually running Dart on the server in production? I mean, I tried it in 2019 and that quickly fallen and abandoned. But maybe at this point it's not as powerful as it used to be.
If you look at the Dart work, it's maintained by very good ventures and it's making huge steps forward. It's very, very interesting to use. I also want to use it once. I get mine.
Progress the use case work, right? Also, server what is on my list for ages.
Yeah.
For a few months, definitely to check it. But it's always I have more on my wish list. Is like, hey, Firebase, come on, mate.
That works already. Not really.
Yeah, but I want to have it natively.
Yeah, but you can have the transpiler, and most of it kind of works, not in production.
We had a Docker image running on AWS Fargate, like that worked.
Yeah.
And then we wanted to log to a new relic, and we had to do Dart FFI and
You usually don't want to get so far.
Having Dart as service would be awesome.
Yeah.
It's a nice language, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's why I actually that's why it was on my list on getting into the what's new part, because I think it's something like if you're fluent or if you're working with Flutter a lot, you're getting used to Dart a lot, and you probably will say like Dart is so cool, why not write everything in Dart? Like and going in the backend to have the full stack feeling feels kind of native way to go, the way to go if you want, at least from the developer perspective. But I would say just what you guys said here in the round. I would say doing it production depends probably on your SLAs and what kind of enterprise level you are. I would say if you're on a very enterprisey bigger level, you wouldn't go with something so newish. You wouldn't probably like if you're newer company, then you can go with Flutter. But even enterprise companies are saying no, it's too new, and they are still going with Java and stuff like that. So yeah, it always depends on what kind of enterprise level you are, what kind of SLAs you want to be able to stick to, and how much experience you have as a team to be confident in what you do with for example, data backend. But as we saw in the round, like probably no one did it in production, and
It's a nice talk for the future.
yeah, it might be a nice talk for the future. That's right. So if everyone in the round, for example, wants to talk about Dart in the backend, we're up for that. No, yeah, but it's a very, very interesting topic. I think it has a lot of potential, especially with this co-working with Flutter, like this whole experience. But I think going with it in production is a big step to do. Not impossible. You can do it, of course. But you might be, if you're like a hardcore backend developer, you might be used to a lot of features like current backends already have, and you might not find it already in Serverport or Dart Frog in the state you would like it to be, for example.
Just like integrations right into databases.
For example, or having a good integration of OpenAPI spec and stuff like that. There is compatible stuff for JFrog and Serverport for that, but it's not on the same level if you would go with, for example, JBoss or Bootspring or, for example, Nest.js or stuff like that. They are more mature on this level because they are focusing only on that. And Serverport, I don't know, they started around 1.5 years ago. It's still pretty new. So there's a lot of stuff they have to get into. They can use a lot of knowledge from other frameworks, of course. All they can do it, but still they have to be mature, be proven in production, have some references and stuff like that, and to get into it.
If you're interested in Serverport, there is a very lengthy podcast episode about it, where the maintainer is interviewed, and I think he came from the Flutter team.
Ah.
So that's why he started it, because he saw that as a need. So it might be interesting just to look into the podcast. It's half a year old or a year old, but interesting.
Oh yeah, good one. It's actually a very good one.
By the way, it's always fancy. I just told Mike in the beginning when you showed the Serverport announcement. I don't know, but the whole Flutter community, they always use fancy animations and designs, and even for Serverport, this is I don't know what it is.
Yeah, this avatar and
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Even the Flutter.
yeah, sure. It has to be fancy nowadays, so otherwise not going recognized. Cool. Sure. Just asking.
I mean, it's similar to Moya. I mean, our customers don't see it. They interact with it, but they don't see it. So we have our company, we have conversational universe. So we communicate with our customers via WhatsApp, and we build around WhatsApp with Flutter, the whole backend to manage everything. And that's completely in production. And I love it. I mean, I never was able to code so fast in web. We did it at 2 years ago, and we haven't been happy with it. There have been a lot of problems, especially the typical ones like selecting tags and all the stuff, right? What you need when you work with it. And also at the beginning, I remember at our company that the backend guys who worked with the system, they said, oh, I just want to copy this text. And then I was always like, okay, I have to make this selected with this selected. Now it's fixed with the new version, right? So I think that was the last piece missing. I don't experience anything. I mean, it's nothing you would do with zero or something like this, right? It's just for education. But I think the you have this web page, you can just click on it and say, hey, add to my phone, and then it's like an app, and it feels like a little app. It's good.
Also a very good topic for a talk. So if everyone is up to see like the differences, how mature it is, so you see there is a lot of topics we can talk about, we just need people to do it. So if you're up to it, get to us.
There's
But
not so much to say, it's just like start doing it for benefits.
yeah, some differences. But thank you a lot. It was very nice having this structured talk, having you you guys doing it, having you all guys joining us. I hope you liked it all. If we would be prepared, we would have a feedback form, but we are not prepared, so we don't have a feedback form. We will have one in the future. And I hope you will all join us for the next one. Stay tuned, look out for the meetup page. Oh, I think I have a thank you page. Join us on Twitter. We have the Flutter Hamburg tag. On Meetup, it's the same name, Flutter Hamburg. You will find us there. You probably have been on Meetup because that's why you're here. But stay tuned there. We will post new event there. And try to keep up with Twitter as well, and maybe we'll even start new channels as well. Discord, Slack. We have it's very newish. We will see how we can expand, and we would love to get you all involved. Hit us up. We all are happy if you want to talk to us about anything, and would all love to see you again in the next talk. And now off to pizzas and networking. Thank you.